Hello, everybody. We are back again with another marketing strategy session. So today I have Mitch Duckler on the call with me. He is with Full Surge. He also is an author, has a great book out, and he'll tell you more about that. Being indispensable, it's incredible how you can make yourself and your brand stand out above any others with some simple tips. So, Mitch, thanks for coming on the call with me today.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here with you.
Great. And we've been talking about having you on for what, almost a year now, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's been that long.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I'm very honored to have you on. You have been dealing with brands for a long time. You've worked with different brands. You've helped brand yourself and your company, Full Surge, and it's an honor to have you and hopefully pick your brain a little bit. I hate when people say pick your brain, but pick your brain and get some of your insights. So I'm sure that the community will enjoy this. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your journey. So we get a little bit more familiar with you.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I have a little over 25 years of experience in brand and marketing, and it's somewhat split between client side and consulting. So I started my career as a brand manager, actually, with Unilever and Coca-Cola, and did that for about 10 years. And for the last 15 or so have been on the consulting side. Although still strictly within the brand and marketing strategy field. So what that includes is, I help clients position their brands, fine tune or sharpen their value proposition, identify paths for growth using their brands as assets, brand architecture and portfolio strategy, brand experience, and so forth. Basically, helping clients take their brands and use them as a strategic asset and a competitive advantage.
Okay. Now, you said a lot of words, big words. We don't know. So let's start with the best word, brand. What is a brand?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us, we think we know what brands are. But, for those that may not, what does brand mean?
Brand is essentially the key premise or promise that you are making to a consumer or a customer, or really any stakeholder that's interacting with your company, with your products, your services, et cetera. It's essentially the sum total of that experience that particular audience member, again, typically it's customers, but it can be others, have with your offering. Okay. So, it's very importantly, it's much more than what most people typically associate with brand. Very often you'll hear people talk about a logo or a trademark or a name or a slogan or even an endorser as the brand, and that's not really the case. It's so much more than that. It is really the sum total of everything that your company, your product and service you're offering presents to the customer.
Okay. So, and that makes sense because a lot of times when you say brand, everybody just thinks logo. I mean, it's just
exactly.
So
exactly,
that's good. And you've written a book to help people with their branding. Tell us more. And I love the title with the indispensable. Tell us how you came up with that.
Sure. Yeah, really the premise behind the book is that in the last 15 to 20 years in particular, we are suffering from a condition which I refer to in the book as brand monotony. And what that means quite simply is it's become increasingly difficult to distinguish between brands, even leading brands within any given category. There is just more sameness, more monotony, more uniformity than ever before. Mm-hmm. And I go into a lot of reasons in the book as to why I believe this has occurred. But more importantly, what the book is a call to action for is to think about different ways to establish differentiation because I do think differentiation is still, through everything, the key to making yourself indispensable to customers.
Mm.
And so the book really kind of starts there. Again, what is a meaningful point of difference, and what are different ways or paths or avenues you can pursue to achieve differentiation?
Okay.
And then very importantly, the remainder of the book is about, okay, so then once you have that differentiated positioning, what do you do with it? How do you reflect it in your product and service offer? How do you reflect it in your customer experience? How do you reflect it in your growth strategy, et cetera?
Okay. Now, a lot of that, I think, comes to from when I consult. A lot of companies want to be like everyone else. I mean, they're like, this works for this company, we're going to copy it, and then, of course, as a consultant, you always say, yeah, well, what is your unique selling proposition? And they're like, we're different. Well, how are you different? We're just different.
Right.
I think that it's hard for a lot of companies to get a grasp of what that looks like. What does that mean? So.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, Jeff. I mean, one is a tool as digital has become, and as much potential and opportunity as it represents for brands. I do think the downside of it is that it has caused a lot of the monotony, and I think it is for the reason you mentioned. I think a lot of marketers, just with the explosion, right, of the internet, and with the ubiquity of all these different platforms, and having to stay on top of it, and best practices and associated with digital activation, I think you become overwhelmed. And what do you do when you become overwhelmed? You start to you start to copy others, right? And revert to so-called best practices. And it's an understandable reaction, but I think it's really, like I would say, collateral damage to the internet, right? And to digital activation is that there has been a lot of people resorting to copycat techniques, and, well, if our competitors are doing it, therefore we need to do it, and we need to do it the same, because they probably know what they're doing. So I do think that that's a lot of what's behind this.
And I don't think that they research the full scope of what their competitors are doing. I think they're taking little small pieces of it and saying, this is what they're doing, let's copy it. So, it's not like, I watched the Pepsi commercial on the Super Bowl. I don't know if you had a chance to see Pepsi's black commercial, where they basically took the Coca-Cola can and they turned it black with the Pepsi logo.
Yeah.
I thought that was real bold. I was like, wow. They've always been going head to head, but that was a real bold statement. But I don't know if you caught what I caught, but you remember when Coke had the Black series? Coke had a black brand at one time, and they kind of and it kind of took me back to that. I was like, wait a minute, remember when Coke turned all this bottles black and it had the whole black campaign? I was like, this is nothing but that. This is really interesting. Now, of course, I'm a different breed, so I'm looking at it that way. Everyone else is looking at it for the entertainment aspect of it. But I was like, that's nothing but the Coke Black when they came out with their no sugar, no caffeine black campaign. So
and that's a great example. That's not even digital per se, right? That's just in terms of advertising creative. But you're right. It's almost like we've given up trying to establish differentiation, right? And define meaningful points of differentiation, and then importantly execute very consistently and relentlessly against it. And that takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, it does. So with that being one of the biggest challenges when it comes to branding, what helped you? What was your light bulb, your aha moment to say, this changes everything? I mean, when it comes to the way I do business, the way I brand, the way I recommend branding, this was my moment of clarity.
Right. I think it came from it was years ago, really, but it did lead to what is eventually the premise of the book, and that is that I think branding certainly grew up in a much simpler time, right? It was much more straightforward, simpler in nature. Basically, there were 3 broadcast TV networks, and what you did is you created your 30-second commercial and you ran it over and over and over. And eventually, if you were successful and did it well, your brand was positioned in the minds of consumers. But we live in a very different environment now, one that is obviously far more than 3 broadcast networks, right? I mean, since then we've had cable TV and satellite and now DVR, and now we're talking, the internet, obviously, and all the new media that comes with it. So it's a very different world, and I think we need to think about our brand strategy tools like positioning differently. And I think positioning for far too long was thought of too narrowly, and namely that your brand needed to be positioned around a benefit. And I think the problem with that is, in most categories, or in many categories certainly, the benefit that your product or service provides is generic, or almost universal. It might even be a cost of entry. So I use the example, because I worked for a number of years in the hair care category, that basically at the end of the day, there's one benefit, right? And it's beautiful hair, right? And that's why you use hair care products, because you want beautiful hair. I mean, there are some special cases, right? There might be dandruff or what have you. But by and large, there's a universal category benefit around beautiful hair. And if you try to differentiate around it, try to own that, you almost inherently are defaulting to monotony, right? Everybody's going to be claiming the same benefit, and you almost by definition lose differentiation. So what I think brands in that category have done, and other categories need to think about doing, is, okay, if it's not the what, if it's not a benefit that is your point of difference, maybe it's a how, or maybe it's an ingredient or a process. There's been a lot of brands, as you know, Jeff, I'm sure, that are really positioning themselves around their why or their purpose, or their who, like a persona or a lifestyle type brand. So I think the aha was, we need to think about our frameworks, our tools and frameworks around brand strategy differently and more robustly than we have in the past, and in particular when it comes to defining differentiation.
Okay. And that makes sense. I mean, back with the 3 networks, it was push marketing.
Yep.
So
exactly,
whoever could get in front of you the most and pretty much make you think a certain way. With social media and the internet, it's pull marketing. It's more, they have options very readily available, and it's overload of information. So it's harder to just be in their face, or let's put it like this, it's a lot more costly to be in their face all the time when there's so many options, and they can turn it off. Like before, if you turn off the radio and the television, you had nothing to do.
Right.
Now you can turn off a website, you can turn off a social post, and there's a million more right after it. So I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is something that the point you bring up, Jeff, is something I do talk about a lot in the book. And that is, especially because of the internet, digital activation, social media in particular, it is very difficult to be heavy-handed or push, as you say, or unidirectional, right? And because of that, marketers do have less control than they did certainly 40, 50 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean that we as marketers can't influence and continue to shape and try to direct or influence the positioning of our brands. It just is more difficult, and requires, I think, different skills and greater discipline, because it isn't as much of a command and control as it was when marketers really were able to kind of go at it, as I say, unidirectionally, right?
Yeah.
I talk, you listen. It's not that simple anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, if you had one strategy that you would say, okay, follow this, and this gets you in the right direction. I mean, it won't take you A to Z, but it'll at least put you in the right direction. What would that strategy be?
Strategy, I'm sorry, Jeff, in terms of
Setting up your brand, approaching your brand, just to get them started. If you were to approach a brand, and let's say you were to come in and say, okay, this is the first exercise I would like for you to do. First thing to think about, or let's take a strategy to give a takeaway from.
Yep, got it. Yeah, I think it would go back to, again, this point of differentiation, meaningful differentiation, right? Not just being different is enough. It has to be meaningful differentiation. But if you think about, and we've already talked about them, but I'll reiterate, I would argue there are 4 different bases that you can use to identify points of difference. So the obvious one, and the one that I said can lead to trouble if it's universal in your category, but it is a benefit, or what I call a what. Okay. So, ask yourself, what is it? What is the primary benefit a customer gets from your product or service? Is that differentiated? The second one is the how, right? So that's where we talked about, do you have a special formula or an ingredient or a process or approach? Do you have unique IP, intellectual property? And that's a how, right? So the benefit may be universal, but the way you deliver it might be unique. So for example, Airbnb has a unique business model, essentially, right? They're going to give you a place to stay, a bed to sleep in at night, and a place to stay, but obviously it's not a hotel. It's a very different delivery. So that's the how. The third is the why. As I mentioned before, there's been a lot, and I think it's really not new anymore, but the whole notion of purpose, branding, is really about defining your brand through a why. What is your greater purpose? And it may have absolutely nothing to do with your category, or it may, but what is your purpose? Do you have a meaningful purpose? And if you don't, that's fine. Not every company defines itself that way, but if you do, is that actually the basis for differentiation? And then finally, personality or persona. So, one of the most famous examples, obviously, is Virgin, right? And that is defined by its founder, Richard Branson. Mm-hmm. But is there something about your personality, what you exude as a brand, that makes you differentiated? And when you ask yourself those 4 questions, you need to be able to identify. You need all 4 of those, to be clear, right? You're going to have to deliver a what, a how, a why, and a who. But at least one of those needs to be your point of difference, I would argue.
Okay. So it would probably be best if, when you're putting together your brand, you and your team sit down and have a brainstorming and basically put it into a quadrant and say, here's the quadrant, let's list out each one, and then develop from there what our brand is going to be.
Yes, definitely. But I would also add to that, it's very important, critically important, to get the voice of the customer too. And to understand what it is that they value, what drives purchase and loyalty for them, mm-hmm. and how they view your brand and how they view competitive brands and how that stacks up. And it's really when you combine those 2 lenses. Okay. So to your point, Jeff, you can certainly start with the internal perspective and what is it that you believe you offer and do differently, but then you have to combine that with the voice of the customer and make sure that that's reflected in your positioning as well. Okay, and that's easier now than it used to be, because social media, people they express their opinions very, very often. So it's a little easier than back in the days. You had to get a focus group and you had to ask these questions. Now you can just troll the internet and you can find out people's opinion about certain brands and what they like. Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that even traditional market research costs have come down significantly, both qualitative and quantitative in recent years. Your ability to do focus groups, or you can do them online for a fraction of the cost. So even if you do want to do traditional market research, you value that. It's probably more affordable now than ever before. But in addition, if you can't or choose not to your point, Jeff, yes, social listening is a form of market research in and of itself, and you can learn a lot through that. Yeah.
So that's great. I know I've gotten my share of gift cards to take small
Yeah,
surveys. So they work. They definitely work. So
they do.
what's next on the table with you, Mitch? What's next in the world of Full Surge and the world of Mitch?
Well, both Full Surge and I would say me individually, we're doing a lot in the area of what we're calling brand inspired digital activation. So as I said, my theory, and certainly it just is a theory, there's not necessarily proof behind it, but I do believe digital activation, as positive as things have been for marketing,
Mhm.
is one of the causes of the monotony that I was describing earlier. So we're focusing a lot on how do you use brand to infuse your digital activation and make sure that in addition to all of the things that you want to accomplish through digital,
Mhm.
like customer acquisition and retention and driving driving revenue, you are also doing so in a manner that is consistent with your brand
Okay.
and making sure that your brand positioning is reflected, whether it's your website design and development, whether it is your search engine optimization strategy, your content marketing, your social media, your email marketing, whatever. Yes, there are best practices and things you can do to optimize those, but they should also be done in a way that are consistent with your brand. And I believe in the digital realm, that is less often the case than it is in the analog, right? I think we as marketers are better in traditional marketing, making sure that our brand positioning is driving all those efforts and not as much so in digital. So we've been focused a lot on that, doing a lot of speaking and presenting on it, as well as helping our clients with what we call brand inspired or brand centric digital activation.
Okay. Okay. Well, definitely look forward to seeing more of that. And for the community, reach out and find out more about that if you are struggling with your brand, because a lot of times we get stuck in the old way of doing things, and things change. If you don't change with it, then you're definitely going to be left behind. So I encourage
Exactly.
everyone, to listen to the talks. I mean, Mitch is available to talk to you. I mean,
Yep.
he has information on his site that can help you. Now, when I say available to talk to you, that doesn't mean he's like sitting by the phone every day and just waiting for your call to pick his brain. But in venues such as this and information that he has on the site and in the book, he is talking to you and providing you information that can help you. So definitely encourage you to take advantage of that. And as well with the marketing strategy sessions, you get insight, and the Marketology group community, you'll get different insights that helps you grow your business and ultimately, your brand. So, Mitch, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Um, Definitely encourage everyone pick up the book. He actually has it in different formats. So if you're not a person that needs to sit down and read it, get it on Kindle and have it read to you. But you know,
Yeah, and Jeff, I would also like to offer your listeners, if they're interested, they can email me, and maybe you in the show notes or what have you can list my contact information. But I can send a complimentary digital download of the book to the e-reader of their choice if you
okay.
reach out to me and request it.
Great. I thank you, Mitch. Yeah. So everybody,
You're welcome.
if you don't take advantage of that offer, then that's on you. I mean, if your brand suffers and you don't take advantage of the free information of somebody that's been doing it for 25 years, then,
Yes.
I guess you can't blame anybody but the person in the mirror. So I'll put that information in the show notes. Actually, I'll look at having it even attached to the video if I can get my producers to do that. That way, it's easy for you to find it, easy for you to get your copy and start thinking differently about your branding. So everyone, thanks again for stopping in. I know you got to get back to work, and we encourage you to provide feedback, because that feedback helps not only my show, but it also helps Mitch and other guests find out more about your needs so they can help assist you with your needs. So take care and best of success for you and your business.